الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. سورة أنزلناها وفرضناها وأنزلنا فيها آيات بينات لعلكم تذكرون. الزانية والزاني فاجلدوا كل واحد منهما 100 جلدة ولا تأخذكم بهما رأفة في دين الله إن كنتم تؤمنون بالله واليوم الآخر وليشهد عذابهما طائفة من المؤمنين. الزاني لا ينكح إلا زانية أو مشركة والزانية لا ينكحها إلا زان أو مشرك وحرم ذلك على المؤمنين. والذين يرمون المحصنات ثم لم يأتوا ب4 شهداء فاجلدوهم 80 جلدة إن الله غفور رحيم. والذين يرمون أزواجهم ولم يكن لهم شهداء إلا أنفسهم فشهادة أحدهم 4 شهادات بالله إنه لمن الصادقين. والخامسة أن لعنة الله عليه إن كان من الكاذبين. ويدرأ عنها العذاب أن تشهد 4 شهادات بالله إنه لمن الكاذبين. والخامسة أن غضب الله عليها إن كان من الصادقين. ولولا فضل الله عليكم ورحمته وأن الله تواب حكيم. إن الذين جاءوا بالإفك عصبة منكم لا تحسبوه شرا لكم بل هو خير لكم لكل امرئ منهم ما اكتسب من الإثم والذي تولى كبره منهم له عذاب عظيم. لولا إذ سمعتموه ظن المؤمنون والمؤمنات بأنفسهم خيرا وقالوا هذا إفك مبين. لولا جاءوا عليه بأربعة شهداء فإذ لم يأتوا بالشهداء فأولئك عند الله هم الكاذبون ولولا فضل الله عليكم ورحمته في الدنيا والآخرة لمسكم فيما أفضتم فيه عذاب عظيم إذ تلقونه بألسنتكم وتقولون بأفواهكم ما ليس لكم به علم وتحسبونه هينا وهو عند الله عظيم ولولا إذ سمعتموه قلتم ما يكون لنا أن نتكلم بهذا سبحانك هذا بهتان عظيم يعظكم الله أن تعودوا لمثله أبدا إن كنتم مؤمنين ويبين الله لكم الآيات والله عليم حكيم إن الذين يحبون أن تشيع الفاحشة في الذين آمنوا لهم عذاب أليم في الدنيا والآخرة والله يعلم وأنتم لا تعلمون ولولا فضل الله عليكم ورحمته وأن الله رؤوف رحيم
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, sisters. Welcome to our national online series brought to you by UKIM on Surah Nur. We'll be covering several topics of this surah, inshallah, uh, in the following 4 weeks, inshallah. So, without further ado, let's begin. I will be your speaker for today. My name is Madiha Khan, and I am from UKIM Leicester, and I will be providing the introduction of this surah, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let's begin with a few du'as. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم إني أسألك علما نافعا ورزقا طيبا وعملا متقبلا ربي زدني علما. So without further ado, let's begin, inshallah. So the first thing I would like to share with you all is our communal slide, which shows how the concept, the theme of today can be brought to a growth point and then, inshallah, bring about change, bring about fruition with flowers. So our topic for today is introduction of this surah, which is Surah Nur. Alhamdulillah. And Nur in Arabic means light. So, how can this concept of light bring about change? So, how did this light spread amongst us? Without this light, there can be no justice or equity or any form of anything to do with that doesn't have to do with oppression. Now, when we sow this seed, which is light, into the soil, we will experience growth. How do we nurture the ideas? By systematic change in our laws and personal beliefs regarding adultery and all the barriers to adultery, about privacy, about marriages, and general social etiquettes. The way we see change is when we see a positive change in our personal, family, and community life, inshallah. Only then will we see women treated with dignity and justice, Only then will we see the darkness of dhulm disappear and be replaced by the light, the nur of righteousness, inshallah. So I'd like to start with the first ayah of Surah Nur, which I'll be focusing on today. Suratun anzalnaha wa faradnaha wa anzalna fiha ayatin bayyinatin la'allakum tadhakkarun. This is the chapter which we have revealed to you and made obligatory for you to follow its guidance. We have revealed clear verses in it so that perhaps you may take heed. So I would like everyone to focus on this word, faradnaha, which comes from the word fard, which means obligatory. The verses in this surah, the commandments, the advice and instructions that we've been given by Allah, they are obligatory for us, and we do not have the option of not following them. And the surah starts off on a very strong note. And the reason is that sometimes as women in today's world, we feel some of the commands may be difficult for us to follow. But we need to remember that any of the commandments given by Allah are there for our own good and for our own protection. So this is an absolutely beautiful surah, and the specific commands that we find within this surah are designed to protect us, protect our chastity, our honor. Unfortunately, some of the worst attacks on our deen are directed towards the punishments stated in the Quran, specifically the hudud punishments. So there are instructions in this surah relate to punishments regarding zina or adultery. There's also the case of qasf, which means false witnesses. When you give a false witness to a crime, which will be discussed further on, inshallah, in this series. There's also the situation of li'an. Li'an means when a person accuses their spouse of cheating on them and being in a physical relationship with someone else. So there are specific instructions given if such a situation should occur. Then there are the counsel and advice given to us in situations of slander and also in the spreading of rumors. So Islam, unfortunately, has been labeled as barbaric, medieval, an enemy of humanity, etc., and plenty of other incorrect labels that we've been that our deen has been given. And there can be plenty of reasons for them. Like, for example, there can be the lack of knowledge regarding this surah specifically. Then there may be actions of ill-informed Muslims from our ummah, and then there can simply be blind enmity, grasping at the chance to slander our deen wherever possible. However, if we were to dive in depth into this surah, we would realize just how beautiful the surah is. As I've mentioned before, the word nur means light. We need to realize that this surah, which means nur, light, is meant to spread its lights and protect us from falling into the dhulm, into oppression. And this surah can never be a means to establish injustice in this world. So um, uh, I'm going to direct you all to another passage of the Quran in Surah Ibrahim. وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا مُوسَى بِآيَاتِنَا أَنْ أَخْرِجْ قَوْمَكَ مِنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ وَذَكِّرْهُم بأيام الله إن في ذلك لآيات لكل صبار شكور. And we certainly sent Moses with our signs, saying, bring out your people from darkness into the light and remind them of the days of Allah. Indeed, it is in that are signs for everyone, patient and grateful. So it cannot be possible that Allah reveals a surah with the title of Nur, light, and then use it to spread oppression and darkness. This is beneath Allah. This is beneath Him. It can be argued that abandoning this surah with its commandments and laws could push our society into injustice and rampant exploitation. And unfortunately, if we look at the state of the world today, at the inequity and the abuse and the soaring crime rates, we can observe firsthand how devastating the consequences of abandoning this surah have been. We need to first and foremost make dua that Allah grant us the ability to recognize the truths in this surah, and may He grant us the steadfastness to follow His commands. Ameen. So if I'd like everyone to read with me the dua for guidance. Allahumma arina al-haqqa haqqan warzuqna ittiba'a wa arina al-batila batilan warzuqna ijtinaba. Oh Allah, show us the truth as true and inspire us to follow it. Show us falsehood as false and inspire us to avoid it. So we need to first make the intention to want to understand the truth that lies in the surah, and Allah will help us rid of any fear or insecurities or misconceptions regarding His commands. Sisters, let's all make dua that Allah give us the strength to not only understand the surah, but to also convey it to other sisters, inshallah. So I'm going to share a bit of a background of this revelation. It has 64 verses divided into 9 rukus or sections. It is a Madani surah, which means that it was revealed at the Madani time period when after the Prophet ﷺ had migrated to Medina. There are 14 Makki surahs before it. Makki surahs are those as you may know already, which were revealed when the Prophet ﷺ lived in Mecca before the Hijrah, and they focused on the fundamental principles of Iman, like belief in Allah and His prophets, the importance of the messengers, the belief in the hereafter. Nur comes right after Surah Mu'minun. So anyone reading the Quran will have perfectly understood and taken in the principles of beliefs of our deen. So, as I mentioned, Surah Nur was revealed in Medina, approximately 5 to 6 years of the Hijrah, approximately. And that means that 15 to 16 years since the very beginning of the message of Islam. So, one may ask, why then was this surah revealed at this particular point in time? The thing is, once our nafs or soul becomes obedient to Allah, then physical obedience is not a problem. At this point, we are able to curb our desires and exercise restraint in the way of Allah because we recognize that our Lord is merciful. We understand that when Allah has made this world work for us, has made the sun, the moon, the stars, the trees, everything work for us, for our sustenance and growth and enjoyment, then our obedience to Allah is also for our own benefit, inshallah. So first, we need to first of all differentiate the concepts of this earth and this world. Everything on this earth follows Allah's commands, like the sun and the oceans, the trees, the birds. Not a leaf drops from a tree without Allah's permission. However, it is man who runs this world, and man does not follow Allah. So Allah's rule of law does not run in this world, not until man becomes obedient to Allah. So how do we go about doing that? Let's take driving tests, for example. There's a theory side and a practical side, correct? So we need to study for the theory separately. And what do we need to do to prepare for the practical side? By spending hours and hours with our driving instructors or husbands and dads. And hopefully the outcome won't be like the person in the picture, right? Oh, inshallah, most of us sisters will have passed without any accidents. So we need to put so much practice on the road, putting all this theory into practice, right? Similarly, Allah's book is the theory. The ones who put that theory into practice were the prophets. So Allah gave the blueprint, and our Prophet ﷺ built our deen using that blueprint, made it into a reality. And this is Sharia. So what is Sharia? It's a collection of Allah's commands and the ahadith, the sayings of the Prophet ﷺ. So it's a combination of words and actions. So إقرار باللسان plus تصديق القلب, to acknowledge and to believe by our tongue, lisan, and by our heart, qalb. So now we have iman, and whoever has iman will want to act on his beliefs. Iman and the righteous deeds, they go hand in hand. So Sharia is that magic touch that turns copper into gold. Now it's Allah's wisdom in that the Sharia was not implemented overnight. The people's minds and hearts were made ready slowly and gradually over a period of time before something was made obligatory or fard. They were shown the negative sides of an action which appeals to man's nature and emotions and minds. So there are several worldly advantages of following Sharia. I mean, we have the advantage, inshallah, that Allah will appreciate our efforts and it'll be written in our book of good deeds, will come of use to us in the day of judgment. However, there are several worldly advantages as well. So I would like everyone to please use the chat box and explain to me what the worldly advantages are, for example, for the command of establishing the prayer, right? Can anyone please maybe share what's the worldly advantages of prayer? Okay, discipline. Okay, mashallah. Meditation, sabr, right? Physical and social activity, time management, very, very good, mashallah, right? It helps to develop a good routine. Okay, mashallah, really, really good response. It gives structure to your day. It brings people closer to Allah, keeps us away from sins. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. So everyone's got it, right? So the outcome in this world is that our prayer protects us from immodesty and sins because we are standing in front of Allah 5 times a day. It disciplines us, teaches us to obey our leader, the Imam, when we follow the Imam in prayer, right? And essentially, it gives us good tarbiyah, right? So, mashallah, really good responses. Now, we have another command in the Quran to pay zakah, right? So, can anyone tell me what are the worldly advantages of paying zakah? The poor, okay, purification, brings out empathy, cleansing, purifying wealth, mashallah, really good responses. Humbleness, okay, fixing poverty issues, sharing, even distribution of wealth, circulation of wealth, mashallah, mashallah, really good responses, right? So eliminates poverty in theory and helps decrease the love of wealth from our hearts, inshallah. Then we also have another commandment, which is to keep away from alcohol. Alcohol is haram in Islam, right? So, what would be the logic behind that? What could be the worldly advantage of keeping away from alcohol? Staying healthy. Okay, good, mashallah, right? Okay. Okay, so alcohol impairs our senses, so staying away from it is better. Physical health avoids accidents and fights. Yes, mashallah, mashallah, right? So the point is that Islam wants there to be positive results in this world, like a decline in shamelessness and immodesty, and a person's control should be over their own judgment and intellect and inhibitions. None of these commands that we've discussed were revealed overnight. Alcohol wasn't forbidden in one go, right? It was done gradually in order to ready people's minds to give up alcohol when the command came forbidding it actually was revealed, right? So this is the wisdom behind our deen, right? The way that laws are passed, the way that laws come into fruition, this is the wisdom behind it, right? So around this time when the Surah Nur was revealed, it had been a few years since the Hijrah, like I mentioned, and a fledgling, rudimentary Islamic state had come into being. The Muslims didn't come into power as soon as they did Hijrah. An Islamic economy was built first. And only after the economy was strong did a government come into being. So the cultures, customs, their characters, the entire economy was first strengthened by Islam, and then the government came after that, right? So a building cannot be constructed without a solid foundation. So the people's characters were worked on first, a process called tazkiyah, and this rudimentary state introduced different systems which were at their initial stages. These systems, once introduced and implemented, were consolidated and codified. And after the codification of the law, punishments were introduced to protect these laws, right? So again, think back to the driving example, right? Has anyone of you ever received a ticket for speeding, right? A fine for speeding or parking illegally, right? What is the purpose of this fine? Can anyone tell me in the chat box? What's the purpose of fine if you were, for example, speeding or parking illegally, or in the bus lane, for example, right? Why do we get these fines? Okay, so we don't repeat this act. Okay, right. So it acts like a barrier, right? So we don't repeat the act. Any other answers? Right, safety, good, right? Okay, it makes us respect the rules. It maintains law and order, right? And we learn from our mistakes. We don't harm anyone or cause an accident. Okay, mashallah, really good answers, really good answers. Alhamdulillah. Really happy that the sisters aren't sleeping. Okay, so to implement traffic laws, in reality, it is very easy to make a law, but to implement it, to make sure that people follow it, that is the most difficult part. More often than not, it is not the fear of getting that 100-pound fine that stops us from putting our foot on the accelerator, right? This is why we have CCTV cameras and police officers and hefty fines to make sure that the law is implemented. So if we need deterrence for the laws pertaining to worldly affairs, then how can we believe that we don't need any deterrence when it comes to laws relating to our deen? So the system was first introduced, then implemented, then protected via punishment. Not unsimilar to the way we get fines in for speeding, for instance, right? So now that we know why Sharia was sent down the way it was and how it was implemented and why punishments were necessary, we're going to move on to a structural analysis of Surah Nur, right? And we're going to go through a few of the details, and we're also going to discuss why the Surah Nur follows this particular structure. Now, the opening of the surah deals with protecting our society from social chaos, and the ending of the surah deals with protecting the society from political chaos. And these two topics, they act like borders of the surah, right? So, social order means that humans have a basic fundamental morality, a family structure, right? An ethics, a code of conduct when it comes to gender interaction. The most extreme example of social chaos is when people do the most shameless thing, the most lewd behavior in public, right? Things that are meant not to be done in public. The surah begins by protecting the society from falling into this kind of chaos. Because if this becomes commonplace, if this were to happen all the time, then so will all sorts of other crimes. Now, we unfortunately are living in times where this kind of behavior is already happening with public displays of inappropriate behavior, with people actually doing the deed in public, astaghfirullah. And we are witnessing the sexual deviance and the sexual crimes that are becoming rampant in society. And with time, this deviance is getting worse. We see campaigns now to astaghfirullah, legalize pedophilia, right? To legalize incest or strands of society that practice bestiality, right? When this becomes a normal part of public experience, then we will suffer horrible consequences. Now, a society may be politically stable with a constitution and a court and police and security, clean streets, standing army, the whole 9 yards. However, when this kind of society is falling apart socially, then there's a problem. It's like a body that looks healthy on the outside, but actually has cancer on the inside. On the other hand, you can be healthy on the inside, but injured on the outside. So social order and political order and harmony, they go hand in hand. So at the end of this surah, Allah talks about the necessity of obeying a command from a leader. Now, we don't really see both things going together. Some countries, particularly in the West, have political stability but social chaos, right? And some countries, unfortunately, a lot of Muslim lands have neither political stability nor social order. And in some cases, some rare cases, you might see social harmony but political chaos. Now, a healthy society protects itself with these two borders, and these two need to go hand in hand. This surah also deals with the hypocrites attempting to socially sabotage the Muslims' order in Medina by spreading a great slander against our mother Aisha radiallahu anha. We'll be discussing the case, the case of the slander against Aisha radiallahu anha in greater detail in one of our future sessions. However, I'm going to be discussing the purpose of this, why this happened, right? So after Allah mentions the sabotage attempt, he gives us counsel about what to do in this sort of situation. The intention behind the slander was to create social chaos and demoralize the Muslims, right? So that was the main intention behind this slander. After the instruction to not do zina, right? After that whole emphasis on social order, Allah then revealed that beyond the idea of slander, there are other things that need to be put into place to prevent society from falling into chaos, right? So the first piece of instruction for social order was that when you go into someone's house, don't enter it without seeking permission. So go at a time when you're wanted. Don't show up at odd times or when you know that, for example, the husband won't be in, etc., right? Then the second instruction that we get is when a man and woman are instructed to lower their gaze and cover themselves, right? Because men's biggest spiritual challenge is protecting their eyes, whereas women's biggest spiritual challenge is hiding our beauty. Right? I was mentioning in class the other day that you see even little girls as young as 4 or 5, when they put on a new dress, they're going off showing it to their dads and their moms. Look, I have a new dress. And You don't really see boys doing it that much because this is innate in a woman's nature. Like from very early on, they love to, flaunt their clothes, their body. They love to do their hair. They love to, do makeup, make themselves look pretty. So our biggest challenge as women is to hiding our beauty and covering ourselves. Now, these are the biggest worldly distractions from our spiritual progress, different for both men and women. Then how to protect ourselves from it. And the third piece of instruction that we get is to encourage young people to get married. And then after that, we get the Ayatul Nur, the passage of light. So we progress to one of the most beautiful verses in the Quran, which is the passage of light, which describes the heart as something protected inside of a chamber, which looks like an indent or an arched recess in the wall, where you put your lamp inside, and that arch, it looks like a rib cage. Now, this imagery that has been used deliberately, and we are being told to keep the glass of this lamp clean so that the light can spread. So, this is imagery for the heart being pure. And then there's also imagery for the ruh, the soul, in the form of pure oil, which is used to fuel that lantern. And when a match comes from the outside, it lights up. So, light upon light. So, this is the passage of spiritual illumination, perhaps the most profound passage in the Quran about the heart. Now, this is followed by another passage which prompts us to look at the birds, the clouds, etc. And this is the passage on sight. So, there's a connection between light and sight. So, when the heart is cleansed, then the way we see the world around us changes. So, there is a direct progression between light and sight. Now, after Ayatul Nur, we get further instructions for social etiquettes. So, first thing we do is we talk about privacy. Children should seek permission before entering their parents' rooms. Permission correspond with permissions, the laws regarding permissions, right? And then there's another piece of instruction that old women do not need to cover themselves the same way as young women do. Now, this basically is regarding all women who reach an age where they don't feel any desire for the opposite gender, right? They've reached an age where um, they are completely they've given up the idea of beautification because they're at an age where they really don't really they don't really their minds doesn't really go there, so they're allowed to loosen their hijab, to not cover the same way that young women do, because they're quite elderly and they've really reached the age where no one would maybe even see them as beautiful, right? As beautiful in that way. Not talking about the soul. The soul can be beautiful at any age. I'm talking about outer beauty, like a 30-year-old and an 80-year-old do not have the same maybe physical beauty. So this is what we're talking about. People who reach and women who reach such an age that they don't have any desire to beautify themselves at all. So they're allowed to maybe not cover themselves in to that extent, right? After that, we have rules about socialization. So sit with people and socialize, and there is no harm if you sit together and eat together, right? Or if you're more comfortable sitting apart, then you can do that too. So we need to provide a healthy place for families and friends to sit down and meet, right? And it's mentioned here that you can sit together if you feel comfortable, right? And if you don't want to sit together, you can sit apart as well. But there are these sort of guidelines given for socialization, right? Then after this, we see another kind of instruction, which is the political order, which is the end of the surah. So there is an attempt there's a mention of an attempt to deceive the Prophet ﷺ to sabotage the Muslims' military efforts. And there's counsel provided about how to deal with these political efforts to sabotage the Muslims. So the two ends of the surah meet each other here, right? So the structure goes like this. So there is ayahs on social order, which have to do with zina. Then there's three pieces of instruction. Then we have the Ayatul Nur, which is the middle of the surah. Then three further pieces of instruction, and then there's the bit on political order. So the Ayatul Nur is kind of sandwiched between these two ends, right? So moving on, we are going to discuss the effects on society and how letting go of this surah has really damaged society to the extent that we can't even imagine, right? Now, the world that we live in today, it's chaotic, it's disorders, it's disharmonious, it's full of inequity and injustice. And unfortunately, women are bearing the brunt of this. And the statistics that I'm about to share with you are not meant to upset anyone, but to shed light on the extent to which the moral degradation of society has impacted us. So these are from rapecrisis.co.uk, and they are pretty much up to date, these statistics. So 1 in 4 women have been raped or sexually assaulted as an adult. 5 in 6 rapes against women are carried out by someone they know, right? 5 million women in England and Wales have been raped or sexually assaulted since the age of 16. 618,000 women are raped or assaulted every year. That's 1 in 35 women. So, probably at least one woman you know was raped or sexually assaulted in the last 12 months, unfortunately. Now, it's not just women who are affected, it's everyone, right? So, children, unfortunately, are not exempt from this either. They're impacted negatively as well. So 1 in 6 children have been sexually abused in their life, right? Then not just children, it's men as well. Because when a society is faces this level of moral degradation, then every member of that society is impacted, right? So 1 in 20 men have been raped or sexually assaulted as an adult. And despite high rates of rape and an increase in reporting in recent years, charging and conviction rates remain among the lowest since records began, which shows just how badly the justice system of this country has been eroded, unfortunately. 1 in 3 adults who are raped experience it in their own homes. Let that sink in, sisters. It's in their own homes, right? Only 1 in 100 rapes recorded by the police in 2021 resulted in a charge that same year, let alone a conviction, which again points to the failure of the justice system. 9 in 10 girls and young women in school say that sexist name calling and being sent unsolicited images of a sexual nature happens to them or other girls and young women of their age. 9 in 10 girls, which is such a sad state of affairs, such a sad state, right? This again points out to how badly eroded the morality of our society has become, and how when we let go of the light, the nur of the Quran, that is when these sort of crimes, these sort of sexual degradation began to happen, right? The the biggest challenge, every ummah that has come before us has had one big challenge. For example, can anyone tell me what was the biggest challenge for the qawm of Musa alayhi salam? Yeah, does anyone know what was their biggest challenge? Maybe if you could use the chat box. What was their biggest struggle, the qawm of Musa alayhi salam? They worship the golden god, right? So, shirk, right? Shirk, idol worshipping, exactly. So this was the most difficult thing that they had to deal with, because shirk was ingrained into their nature, right? Accepting the oneness of Allah. Yes, mashallah. Good response, right? What about the qawm of Yahya alayhi salam? Does anyone know what their biggest challenge was? Yahya alayhi salam. How about Isa? Right, let's just make it easier. Isa alayhi salam. Yeah, what was their biggest challenge? Does anyone know? What did they struggle with the most? Again, shirk, right? Shirk. Right? Isa alayhi salam didn't have many followers, right? Good, mashallah. What about Hud alayhi salam? Does anyone remember the story of Hud alayhi salam and what he kind of struggled with his qawm? right? What was kind of rampant in society? Arrogance. That's right. That's right. Right? Their qawm was extremely arrogant because of the abilities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had given them. They had extreme pride, and this was something that they were unable to kind of overcome, unfortunately, right? Which is why Allah's adab came on them. Now, here's the biggest question. What is our biggest challenge? What is the biggest challenge of the ummah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? What is it that we struggle with the most as an ummah right now? Unity, okay. Good answer. Worldly distractions, okay. Immorality, yes. Fitna, okay. But fitna of what exactly, right, sister? Fitna of what nature, right? Okay, someone's raised their hand, but I don't know if we are allowed to unmute people. That's why I'm asking people to please use the chat box, right? Let me see if I can unmute you, sister. Hang on. Mm, right.
If you want, I can help you.
Yes,
Yeah.
please, please. So the sister has raised her hand. If you could just unmute her. Sister Adila, I believe.
Yeah, you should be able to unmute.
Sister, would you like to unmute yourself? Okay. I guess maybe the sister is struggling to unmute herself. So, okay, no issue. You can just use the chat box again, right? If anyone wants to raise their hand and maybe participate, then that's absolutely fine. Yeah, I really want the sisters to participate in this and not just sit and listen, right? Okay, we've got some really good answers in the chat box as well. Too much exposure to immorality. Yeah, lack of morality. Everyone, that you've really like hit the nail on the head. So it's definitely immodesty and a huge decline in morality, which is this ummah's biggest challenge, right? And we're seeing it everywhere. We're seeing it with, I've mentioned it before, with the amount of sexual deviance. It's like a disease in the society. It's like an illness, right? We're seeing it with, how low man has stooped now, and they're stooping even lower as time passes by. You think that you've seen everything, and then a new kind of challenge arises related to immorality, related to shamelessness, and you think, oh my god, this is how far we've fallen as a people, right? Unfortunately, so this ummah's biggest challenge is immorality, and this is what these statistics point to, sisters. This is what they point to: the fact that immorality has eroded our society to the extent that no one is safe anymore. Women don't feel safe anymore, children don't feel safe anymore, men don't feel safe anymore, and it's unfortunately a disease that has completely it's spread like a cancer in the world, and it's everywhere, right? You cannot say that there's no one society, one nation, or one country that is 100% safe for people, right? Unfortunately. So this is our biggest challenge, and this is why we are studying Surah Nur this for Ramadan, right? To kind of understand why what is happening now, and what we need to do to rectify it. Right? This surah gives us guidelines to protect ourselves from exactly these sort of crimes that we've discussed, right? Against rape, against sexual assault, against being assaulted by a member of the family, by or against children being assaulted, against men being assaulted. There are guidelines given for all of these scenarios. And if we follow these guidelines, then the light of this surah will, inshallah, change the society for the better, inshallah. Right? Now, if we move on, if we look at the state of the ummah right now, Muslims unfortunately have also, right, our morals have also been compromised, and the moral degradation in society is it's just not limited to non-Muslims, right? Muslims have also given up their morals and principles, right? So unfortunately, it's no longer shocking in the West to see Muslims owning businesses where they supply alcohol, right? Can everyone see my screen, please? I'm not sure because um, it's not moving on my phone. Can everyone see my screen? I've moved
Yeah.
on? Okay, Jazakallah. Right? It's no longer shocking to see Muslims owning businesses which supply alcohol. Okay, Muslim workers will attend pubs with their non-Muslim colleagues with the hope that it will help them progress in their career, right? So and many of us no longer seem to have a focus on the greater good and purpose. We often no longer seem to care about what happens to the other group, other in quotation marks, right? We've become completely numb to the situation in which our brother Muslim brother and sisters may be, right? And our selfishness results in us becoming numb to the oppression around the world. Now, how often do we think of those Muslims who are not featured on BBC or CNN, right? How often do we make dua for the people of Turkey or Syria or Burma or Kashmir, right? So we've absorbed the concept of nation states and nationalism. And this has broken the ummah. There's a hadith, the ummah stands together like a brick wall, but that wall isn't there anymore because the foundations have cracked, right? They cracked a long time ago. And now the wall isn't really there anymore. We're not united together, right? And this concept of nationalism has become so ingrained that we no longer feel for any other Muslim brothers and sisters that may not be from amongst us, maybe from a different country or a different nation, right? If we compare and contrast to to how the Muslims were back then, right? Islam, it came as a miraculous religion, and within 23 years, it had transformed the illiterate Arabs into a force to be reckoned with. This light, this nur of the Quran, it just changed them within a span of 23 years. 23 years, if you think about it, is a very short amount of time to have such a huge change within a nation. But this is exactly what happened, right? There was a time in the Ummah when there was zakat to be distributed in the treasury, but there was no one to receive it because there wasn't abject poverty anymore, right? The governors and khalifas, they were God-fearing people. They were people of taqwa, right? And they lived to serve their people, right? The first public universities were founded in Baghdad, and this is where philosophy and literature was studied, right? Doctors, they studied Greek and Indian works, and they added to their ideas about medicine. There were hospitals in all the major cities, right? Islamic medicine, it developed important medical treatments, including a way to surgically treat eye cataracts, right? And this was a long time before modern surgery had even begun, right? So it's amazing the achievements that they accomplished just through following the commandments of our deen, right? They built observatories to study the sky and invented they invented devices like the quadrant and the astrolabe. The astrolabe, if you want to know, is a handheld model of the universe that can help astronomers identify planets and stars. If anyone were to visit the Greenwich Museum at Greenwich, they'd see actual astrolabes there on display, right? That were invented by Muslims, antique astrolabes, right? It was also this device was also used to explore was also used by explorers to determine the latitude on the sea. So it's something like a compass, right? Islamic mathematicians, they pioneered the study of algebra, and they helped establish it as a separate field of mathematics, right? We all know the father of algebra, right? What his name is, algebra, and he was the one who is called the father of algebra and established it, right? And Indian numerals were adopted and popularized by the Persian mathematician Al-Khwarizmi. They became known as the Arabic numeral system, and they subsequently spread across the globe through trade. So further innovations included the use of a foreigner to the modern bank check, right? It was also during the time of Khalifa Umar radiallahu anhu that the modern post office laid its foundations, right? He invented a system for posts to get to people quicker than it did before, right? There was justice everywhere. There was justice. Our khalifas, they were just rulers, right? I'm going to share a very small story because we do have a bit of time, so I thought I'd share that before conclusion. Anyone know of Khalifa Umar ibn Abdulaziz? Yeah? Does anyone know? who he was? The Khalifa Umar ibn Abdulaziz, very famous name. Yeah, he was the 8th Umayyad Khalifa, and sometimes he's also called the 5th rightly guided Khalifa, right? His rule was only 30 months. So he only ruled for 30 months before he passed away. 30 months, again, is a very small amount of time. It's basically just 2.5 years, right? But his most his best quality was justice. So much so that when he married his wife Fatima, I believe her name was, she was the son of the king before. He asked her to return all the gifts her father had given to her before marriage, because because these gifts he claimed were taken from the people, right? Unjustly. So she returned all the gifts and she basically deposited them in the treasury. He didn't stop there, right? He then basically asked the cousins of his wife to again return all the gifts that they were given by the ruler before, because again, those gifts were unjustly taken from the people, right? So his justice was so that during his rule, not even an animal would attack another animal unjustly, right? There was just the ruler, because his strongest quality was justice. This element of justice was strong among his subjects as well. Now, one day there was a shepherd who was, it's a long story, and mashallah, if anyone has the time, then I would really, really recommend to read into the life of Umar ibn Abdulaziz, because it was inspirational, the way that he ruled his people. So one day there was a shepherd who was on the outskirts of the city, and he was grazing his flock of sheep, and a wolf came up, it snuck up, and it killed one of his sheep. And the shepherd immediately knew that something was wrong, immediately. And he just dropped everything. He ran to the city, right? He ran from the outskirts of the city to the inside, and he asked people, did something happen today? Right? Is something wrong? Because I feel like there's something wrong, and I feel like something has happened. And he was informed that yes, the Khalifa had passed away today, right? So the day he passed away, injustice started spreading amongst the lands. So do you see how having justice amongst people, how having a just ruler, how implementing the commands of Allah really can help in spreading social harmony, right? This is a practical example we have of how a just ruler, he he managed to positively impact his subjects while he was ruling, right? Only 30 months, and he managed to change so much, so much. But unfortunately, he was fighting against a very corrupt system, and they were not very happy about it. So it's an amazing story. If anyone has the time, then do definitely take the time to read about him, right? Biography of Umar Abdul Aziz. I will see if I can find a book and recommend it to you. I do have my branch leader who just did talk on this inspirational personality just a few weeks ago. So I'll ask her, and I'll definitely post on the group, inshallah, if I can find a book that covers the life of Umar ibn Abdulaziz, right? So to conclude, right? To conclude, my question to you is, what went wrong? How did we go from being such an inspirational, amazing ummah, from being the most respected nation on the earth, to such a humiliated one, right? How did we fall so far? How did we come to this, right? Can anyone give answers about why they believe that we why we believe, what contributed to our downfall, basically, right? If anyone would like to, I know it's a bit of a hypothetical question, but if you a metaphorical question, but yes, please use the chat box and see if you can come up with some answers. Jealousy, right? Lack of unity, selfishness, right? Leaving the Quran. Yes, exactly. We've left the Quran behind, right? We don't follow the Quran, we don't follow the Sunnah. I mean, we read it, but we don't actually follow it. Egos, that's a very good answer. Lack of knowledge, people starting to normalize too many things. Okay. Greed, yes, that's a very good answer. Pride, yes, we become arrogant. That's true. Following the Western worlds and the desires, that is an excellent answer. We've basically start following the non-Muslims to the extent that we've given up our morals, our principles, right? Noble Khalifa. Okay, that's a very good answer. We got caught up in the worldly things around us, and we lost the path of our last prophet. Yes, mashallah, mashallah. Lack of ethics, selfishness, stopped progressing in learning. Mashallah, mashallah. Really, really good answer. So yes, these are the answers, right? We gave up following the light. We gave up following the nur of the Quran, right? And this as a result, we're seeing the consequences. We're seeing what's happening today as a result of abandoning the Quran, right? So so what do we need to do? We need to return back to the Quran, right? We need to follow the commands of Allah, not just the ones we like, not just the ones that are easy, but all the commands of Allah, right? The reason I gave such a detailed kind of description about 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 this surah and about how the consequences we are suffering is because we've given up this surah, is because sometimes for some people following some of these commands is not going to be easy. But then Allah didn't promise us ease, right? To get to Jannah, we have to go through a lot of hardships, and that means battling with our nafs, right? So we need to train our nafs to be obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to obey His commands without question, right? We have to obey His commands without trying to find any loopholes. Yes, but okay, the hijab doesn't have to cover the ears, but it doesn't say the neck. Okay, but the kind of clothes that we're instructed to wear, can it be this color? Can it be red? Can it be pink? But just obey Allah. Allah said this is what we have to do, and we have to do it, right? We can't start picking and choosing the commands we like, right? We can't only follow the ones that we like and let go of the ones we don't like, right? And one of the final things is that we need to make constant dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for hidayah, for guidance, because it's only through the blessing of Allah, through the mercy of Allah, that any of us will ever be able to achieve Jannah, right? And if Allah's mercy was not upon us, then we would never be able to get there. So we need to make constant dua to Allah to give us guidance, to give us hidayah, right? And to guide us towards the right path and to keep us on the straight path, inshallah. Right? Okay then. So we are going to, sorry, just a second. Let me see if I have the right appeals. Right, inshallah. So we're going to have a bit of a Q&A now. If anyone wants to unmute themselves, you can raise your hands and unmute yourself. And then we can, inshallah, open the floor for discussions and questions, inshallah. Right? And the sisters are here to help us. If anyone wants to say something, wants to speak up, that's absolutely fine. Or you can even use the chat box if you want to unmute yourself, yeah? Or you want to ask a question in the chat box, you can do that as well. So any aspect of the surah that you want to discuss, or anything from today's topic that you want to maybe clarify further, then yes, we can do that. Come on, sisters. I know it's almost time for iftari, but still 1.5 hours left to go. So we can make it till then, right? So we need to kind of concentrate and see if we can have a positive discussion about what we learned today, inshallah. Okay, then. Since no one wants to ask a question, then I will, inshallah, put forward a scenario. Okay, we have a question. How do you make yourself firm upon the path of Allah? Okay, so we've discussed some of the we've discussed some of the things in the conclusion, some of the steps that we can follow to make ourselves firm on the path of Allah. But my personal recommendations are, first of all, to keep ourselves connected to Allah through salah, dua, and if we can wake up for tahajjud, that is that is like an excellent way of kind of spiritually nourishing ourselves, right? But one of the other recommendations that we get from scholars, is to keep ourselves connected to the Book of Allah, to the Kalam of Allah, by maybe attending different Islamic lectures regularly or following some scholars, right? So maybe join a weekly halaqah and make sure that you're firm on that, right? So whenever the weekly halaqah happens, because shaitan will always find a way to kind of make ourselves busy someplace else. So the day the halaqah happens, what's going to happen is that shaitan will kind of, oh, but you have that thing coming tomorrow. Oh, that bake sale tomorrow. You have to bake those things for the kids. You don't have time, right? So there's this tiny thing that shaitan will use to distract us, because it's his way of kind of making sure that we don't attend them, right? We deviate from the path of Allah. So there's that. And then I always felt that reading the seerah, right, of the Prophet ﷺ it always helped strengthen my iman, right? Because just reading about what he went through, all the things that he went through, all of the hardships or the Prophet ﷺ faced, just so that we as an ummah could benefit from the Book of Allah, it really strengthens your iman. It really gives you conviction. So there's that, inshallah, right? How to overcome obstacles when on the path to seeking knowledge. Well, I just mentioned the shaitan will always kind of make sure that when we are on this path, that he kinds of puts up hurdles in our way, right? Now, I always found dua and istikhara to be one of my biggest weapons when it comes to seeking the path to knowledge. But there's also something that maybe we sometimes forget. Whenever we find it too difficult to maybe follow this path, right? And there's a lot of worldly things that sometimes pile up that we feel like are proving to be an impediment in our way. We still do it. We still go to that halaqa. We still attend that course. We still sign up for that 6 week, whatever it is, right? And what happens is that Allah Ta'ala, He makes it easy for our worldly affairs and they just sort themselves out magically. It has happened time and time and time again with me. I have experienced it that sometimes I've literally faced some of the most difficult times of my life when I'm so caught up in worldly matters and my studies, with my children, with my job, and I've wanted to say no, maybe to something to do with our deen, to do with some organizational responsibility, maybe that UCAM has handed over, and I said to myself, no, you can do this, right? And subhanallah, Allah made my worldly affairs so easy for me, right? So Bismillah, you dive in, and inshallah, Allah will give you that strength to help you, right? So in the Western society, the hijab is worn in different ways. How do you approach and explain the right way? So there is going to be a session on the hijab, inshallah. I believe it's going to be this week, where we're going to be discussing the hijab in greater depth. And we're going to be discussing different scenarios and how the hijab maybe is perceived sometimes, and it's unfortunately very misunderstood by even some Muslims, right? So sometimes we just kind of think it's just a piece of cloth on our head, right? And we don't understand that it's a combination of internal and external modesty, right? And this is something that we need to kind of really understand before we don the hijab, right? That it's not just a piece of cloth; it's also other things, right? But then even when the way we wear the hijab, it needs to adhere to the guidelines that we've been given by our scholars, right? So there's a basic set of guidelines that needs to be loose, and it can be see through, it can be transparent, it needs to cover the hair, and even in the Quran it's mentioned that it needs to cover the chest as well. So if we see sister who is maybe not adhering to the commands of hijab properly, then we can maybe guide her in a way that she won't be offended, right? Because a lot of it comes from ignorance. Unfortunately, we're Muslims. Sometimes they don't even know which is the correct way to wear the hijab. So it just comes from a place of unfortunately ignorance. And if they are informed that the correct way to wear the hijab is this way, then that usually we see a very positive response, inshallah, right? Um, okay, any other questions? Okay, I'm just checking to see if anyone's raised their hand, maybe. So,
Jazakallah khair. Hina, it was a very well delivered session, mashallah. Really thoroughly enjoyed it. And Jazakallah khair for all your hard work as well. There's quite a lot of learning and good interaction. So really enjoyed. Thank you very much.
thank you, sister. Jazakallah.
Jazakallah khair.
Okay, if there are update on the session when the session is on hijab. Well, the session inshallah, I think it will be this week. So I think the details are on the poster. However, I'll ask Sister Misbah to update, inshallah, right, on the zonal group. Okay, alhamdulillah. So I believe there are no further questions, right? So I'm just going to share a few of the appeals that you can. Sorry, can everyone please mute themselves? Okay, Jazakallah. So I'm just going to share a few of the appeals that UKIM is doing for the month of Ramadan, right? So we have our Dawah Fund appeals, which is we have currently launched it for this month of Ramadan, and the Dawah Fund is if some of you may know, and some of you may not know. It's basically used for a host of different activities. It's used to fund a whole bunch of different activities. Some of these activities, I'm just going to give a few details about this. So we have these online webinars that require sometimes a lot of manpower and a lot of resources. So they're used to fund that. Then Dawah Fund also goes towards residentials. And these residentials are an essential part of the tarbiyah of our workforce as well as our sympathizers. These residentials require us to sometimes leave our homes for a few days, hire out a huge venue where we have day-long workshops on different topics. We learn leadership skills, right? These residentials are extremely important for the learning and the training of our workforce. So Dawah Fund, some of it goes towards that. Then there's also goes for the development of, excuse me, of our youth, right? Then there is a lot of work that UKIM is doing for our British Muslims, right? And trying to maybe engage them and trying to understand what struggles they're going through and help them out, right? So a lot of the Dawah Fund goes towards supporting British Muslims. Then we also have a department for revert sisters, where sisters who have reverted to Islam and sometimes may not have the kind of support from their friends and family. We provide them that support. We give them a space to come forward, to attend halaqas, to discuss their issues, right? We also have different training courses for skills development, and a lot of the Dawah Fund goes towards funding these courses. So, sisters, please, the month of Ramadan, it's here, and your good deeds are multiplied so many-fold. So please open your hearts and open your pockets, and we would very much appreciate if someone would contribute towards Dawah Fund appeal. The second appeal that we have today is for the Muslim Council of Britain. It's a branch appeal. And I'm just going to read it out for all of you. The MCB has been representing us as Muslims since 1997, providing British Muslims with a strong representative voice, campaigning on the issues that matter to us, to you, right? The regular charity donations will ensure the MCB can deliver the critical work that helps respond to the challenges facing our communities. So without the kind people who support us, the MCB would not exist, and the MCB can make a sustained difference to our shared future. So the MCB's core administrative expenses are funded entirely by affiliation fees from members, as well as donations from individuals and grant-giving organizations. Donations are also received by the MCB Charitable Foundation, MCBCF, an independent entity registered with the Charity Commission. So its aim is to build a capital fund through which activities of the MCB that are exclusively charitable can be supported. The MCB also runs projects to raise the capability of British Muslim communities and to widen good practice. All MCB projects self-fundraise through sponsorship, donations, or grants, and MCB does not have a central pot of money to fund internal or external led projects. Your support will go a long way, and please help us empower Muslim communities across Britain. Furthermore, I would really like everyone to please follow us on social media. We have a Facebook page as well as an Instagram page. We also have a YouTube channel which has uploads and recordings of so many sessions that prove beneficial to us, inshallah. So if anyone would like to gain further information or maybe get a taster of these sessions, then please check out our YouTube channel and you'll find so many beneficial talks on there, inshallah. So I would like to end today's session with the dua for guidance once again. Let's all please make dua to Allah to guide us. Allahumma arina al-haqqa wa haqqan wa Allahumma arina al-haqqa haqqan warzuqna ittiba'ah wa arina al-batila batilan warzuqna ijtinaba. Oh Allah, show us the truth as true and inspire us to follow it. Show us falsehood as false and inspire us to avoid it. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.